Good morning, you guys. It's your boy Bill Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the entire basketball community. If you want more basketball content, tune into Basketball Conversations every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. This is where we discuss basketball related topics, news, debates, and everything else in the world of basketball. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I start dripping videos and live streams. So this is another episode of Morning Historical Perspective, and who I'm going to touch upon is somebody that Lewis Sports never touched upon, during his Clippers and Mavericks live stream, and he touched upon about Rod Strickland in his comparison with Luka Doncic, and it got me an idea about who Rod Strickland was as a player, and people don't know about him too much. They have not seen his game a lot. So I'm dedicating this video about him per se. Okay. Now, when you look about his career, okay, he grew up, basically he grew up in the Bronx. All right. And he basically grew up playing basketball in the Bronx and developed his game from there. Um, when his career began, he was picked 19th overall in the first round of the NBA draft in 1988 by his hometown team, the New York Knicks. But the problem was he's basically a backup point guard to to Mark Jackson, who was basically the 1988 Rookie of the Year, and it was pretty much a an odd pick at the time because both of them guys were playing the same position, but they shared playing time together, and he basically averaged 8.5 points per game, in his first 2 seasons with the New York Knicks. But he was not happy about playing, a bench role, and he was complaining about not getting enough playing time, and this is going to be a huge thing about his career later on. Okay, and he was seen to be as a guy that was pretty much hard to deal with, and the Knicks knew that having both point guards was going to make things a little bit weird. So they pretty much the Knicks pretty much dealt him to the San Antonio Spurs for veteran Maurice Cheeks during the middle of the 89-90 season. But it turned out to be a move that worked out pretty well. And remember, that Spurs team was the first year with David Robinson. Originally they drafted him back in 1988, but he served 2 years, in the Navy before finally he was able to have an honorable discharge and basically, was able to come into the NBA. Now, that year, the San Antonio Spurs had a really, bounce back, pretty much had a good, turnaround year. Um, they had they basically had a huge renaissance year. Now they basically went 56-26, basically surpassing the 53 win season back in 82-83. And that year, David Robinson came. They added Terry Cummings. They added first round draftee Sean Elliott there too, and it was a pretty much an excellent turnaround. And that turnaround, when Robinson came in, basically was the second single season greatest turnaround in NBA history. And and Robinson finished that year as the rookie of the year, of course. But the San Antonio Spurs that year, they made it all the way to the Western Conference semifinals when they went up against the Portland Trailblazers, who were the top team of the West that year. And in that game 7, um, you know, Rod Strickland had a critical mistake where he basically tried to throw over a head behind the head pass that basically they basically was a huge turnover late in the game, and that stuck with Rod Strickland's career, in the next few seasons because he was a guy who was naturally talented but had a bit of a emotional, loose cannon personality about him, and he often would get into fights with opposing players, with teammates, with coaching staffs, and Larry Brown, who was an excellent coach for point guards, basically had a difficult time, dealing with the personality of Rod Strickland, and after that huge turnaround year, um, he pretty much was had the healthiest time of his career. Um, he only missed 24 games that year, and when he played 58 games that year, he had an excellent year. He averaged pretty much 13.5 points per game and dished out eight assists per game, and put up the same kind of averages in the next 2 years. But like I said, the uh, the problems with him was is that he didn't get the contract that he deserved, and he was in a contract dispute and missed the first 24 games. And you know that those issues, played into a role about how he, as talented as he was a problem player, meaning that his attitude and sometimes a bit of his work ethic, was always into question. Um, Eventually, he basically signed a free agency contract with the San Antonio Spurs. I'm sorry, with the Portland Trailblazers, I should say. And that time in Portland, he saw a career resurgence. Now, that Portland team was making a transitional phase from their two finals appearances early on in the decade, and he was a guy that pretty much took over the point guard position from Terry Porter. And when he started his time in Portland, his numbers increased dramatically. The best part about Rod Strickland's game was that he had an excellent crossover dribbler. He could pull up and hit the mid-range jump shot. He wasn't a efficient, perimeter shooter, but he was able to get into the paint and finish with creative, flair. You know what I'm saying? And he was the kind of guy that can use the pick and roll effectively and can run the fast break very, very well. And you know, during those five seasons he played with the Portland Trailblazers, okay, during those 5 seasons when he played with the Blazers, he really had a really excellent time there. He averaged pretty much 16 points per game. So pretty much he was the kind of guy that really flourished in Portland. But the height of his time was back when he was playing for Washington. Before when he was playing as the Bullets, um, he was pretty much traded. He was pretty much traded in, you know, midway through the 96-97 season, and he helped them big time by pretty much averaging 17 points per game and helping the Bullets make the playoffs for the first time in 8 seasons. The team, led by Rod Strickland, Chris Webber, Juwan Howard, and who else? Calbert Cheney too, yeah, and George Mirashon. That was a really good team, and it's disappointing they didn't keep that team together. But in 97-98, he had the best year of his career, and he averaged 17.8 points per game, but he led the NBA in assists with 10.5 assists per game and was wrongfully snubbed of the All-Star team. And I know why he was snubbed because there were a lot of people in the league that did not like his attitude or his perceived reputation. But the guy was leading the league in assists that year, and he had his best scoring years of his career. And you mean to tell me he didn't deserve couldn't get a spot on the All Star team over some guys that I could easily pick, like maybe Penny Hardaway, who missed a lot of time due to injury, who only played 8 games that year? Like, come on, man. Let's be real about that. I mean, that was just more of a popular pick with Penny than a rifle pick in Rod Strickland, who rightfully deserved his spot on the All Star team. He was wrongfully snubbed that time. Um, During that same year, too, he became the 25th player in NBA history to reach 10,000 points and 5,000 assists and made second team All NBA. But unfortunately, the team couldn't improve in the next few seasons after that, as his point production, slowly began to dip, and immediately immediately he bought out of his contract. You know what I'm saying? And then, he spent some time one season with the Portland Trailblazers, and then some time with Miami, Minnesota, Orlando, Toronto, and Houston before ultimately ending his career. The interesting note about what Rod Strickland was is that he's also the godfather of Kyrie Irving. And when you look at both Kyrie Irving and Rod Strickland's games, they're both similar in their approaches. Now, Kyrie Irving's a better shooter than Rod Strickland ever was, but when you look at their ball handling and crossover dribbling, is pretty much identically the same. Although I will say that Kyrie Irving's handle is a little bit better than Strickland was, but in terms of their ability to finish in traffic against 2 to 3 defenders in the paint, vastly similar. I mean, I remember one time when Shaquille O'Neal was trying to block Rod Strickland's shot, and Strickland basically went show right, and then quickly switched, went left with the reverse going glass. I mean, Rod Strickland was a creative finisher in the paint. He was pretty much acrobatic with his finishing. He wasn't a vastly superior athlete for his size, but he was so creative at the rim, and his ability to break you down off the dribble made him one of the most underrated guards in NBA history and a guy that should have had multiple All-Star appearances. But again, that attitude, that reputation, followed throughout the majority of his prime years. This is a guy that should have been at least a 6 to 8 time All-Star. And if you put Rod Strickland in today's NBA, I guarantee you one thing. I bet you he would have a bit of the similar numbers Kyrie Irving would have. You know what I mean? I mean, Kyrie Irving is a better efficient scorer than Rod Strickland is, but you put Rod Strickland's game in today's NBA, I bet you he would improve his 3-point shooting. He would average probably, I think, between 24 to 27 points per game in today's NBA, considering how much point guards need to shoot the ball, to space the floor, and do a lot of different creative things, man. So, but the thing is, what I'm trying to tell y'all is that the comparison with Luka Doncic and Rod Strickland is a bit accurate in this aspect. With Luka Doncic is not the most athletically gifted player, but he knows his spots on the floor and he knows how to get the best shot available on the floor. With Rod Strickland, he had the same familiar mindset. He wasn't a guy that was going to beat you athletically, but he knew his spots on the floor where he was going to beat his defender. And with that ability to break you off the dribble. And plus, he didn't have an excellent jump shot. Let's be real about this. He wasn't an efficient jump shooter, but he would make jump shots at the right time and also figure out ways to find the best shot available for himself and for his teammate. And both Luka Doncic and Rod Strickland had a similar approach to the way they played, and I can see what Lewis Sports Network was talking about when he made that comparison to that. So I definitely see that kind of mindset about that. But the thing that I really like about what Strickland was is that he was the kind of guy that he showed that he was committed to the game, and he didn't care what other people thought about him, and he had that mindset of, listen, I'm going to be underrated and undervalued, but I'm going to let my basketball do my talking for me. And all you got to do is just judge about my game. I remember that in an NBC interview what he did with Quinn Buckner. He was the kind of guy that he knew he made his mistakes, but he was the kind of guy that just pretty much told him, hey, I'm gonna show you my game, and that's gonna do all my talking for me. And I like that about a Rod Strickland, and he definitely will get my respect a lot throughout what he was able to do on the basketball court. So that's just my 2 cents about Rod Strickland, but I'm anxious to see what you guys think in the comment section about him too as well. Peace.